Hello again, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for this Sunday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, and I'll be hosting tonight's show. First graphic, fire danger, and it's kind of expanded some here, especially over the northeast interior. Hot, dry conditions again, up 70s to as high as mid-80s here in the Yukon Flats area with very warm conditions again. And that kind of connected the two areas up. Extreme areas also expanded a little bit. And also out here to the west, 80-degree temperatures extending westward all the way to the eastern Seward Peninsula here. So now we have high fire danger from the lower Yukon River Valley, about where it meets the delta there, northward across the Nulato Hills into Kilbrook and possibly into the Selawik Valley. And also over the southern panhandle, temperatures mid-80s or anywhere from 80 to 87, with 87 being recorded at Shelter Cove this afternoon at 3 p.m., with other areas seeing around 80, 81, 82, and upper 70s. And moving on to satellite imaging, you can see clear skies down there. And again, what this isn't showing up, this particular imagery, not showing up the low clouds, is focusing on the higher clouds associated with storminess. But a lot of low clouds out here over the and along the southeast coast, again burning back in the afternoon. Mostly clear here, Copper River Basin, eastern interior with all the warm temperatures, and back to the west. And some clouds just grazing the eastern Arctic coast there. The disturbance that now most of the showers have moved into Canada and out of the northeast interior. And a pretty good storm out here over the Bering Sea showing up right there. You can see swinging up across St. Paul and St. George Island, the main frontal boundary there. They brought about half an inch of rain today to St. Paul Island, and even heavier amounts down along the Alaska Peninsula, with Falls Pass picking up nearly an inch of rain. Chignik had about half an inch. And back to the west, lots of clouds, fog, light rain, drizzle, breezy conditions, winds out of the northwest. Small craft advisory, winds gusting anywhere possibly as high as 30 to 40 miles an hour with the small craft advisories, Alaska Peninsula. Winds will be increasing along the southwest coast here. Rain starting to show up along the southwest coast, but nothing very heavy at all. And this system here moving northward brought some scattered showers in across the North Gulf Coast today. Only 500s falling today at Cordova. Kodiak only picked up 1/100th of an inch with this very weak system trough right through there. Otherwise, southern Cook Inlet, southwest Cook Inlet, about 1/10 of an inch. And that's about it. Sunshine, warm temperatures, as I mentioned, from the Copper River Basin, northward across 40-mile country in the Yukon Flats, and then back to the northwest there. Possibly shower kicking off here, maybe over the areas east of or in the Nulato Hills. Otherwise, clouds here gradually pushing their way northward. And then this shower activity now has already moved out of the state. And the low center back to the west, 990 millibars. Good enough for small craft advisory winds. Could be a narrow band of minimum gales in advance of the front, but that's about it. And showers taper off back to the west. High pressure holds here off the southeast coast and over the Gulf of Alaska. And that'll continue into tonight. Lots of low clouds, fog, and drizzle once again show up along probably all of the outer coastline area, trying to work inland over the inside waters. Otherwise, not really much change coming up in the weather pattern there. And diminishing showers will continue here over south central Alaska, but lingering threat just becoming isolated after midnight, mainly over the mountainous terrain. Chance of rain still Kodiak Island, best chance off to the southwest, northward to the Aleutian Range. Bristol Bay kind of in the lee or the dry slot there with those southeast winds or flow coming across, and kind of a rain pattern pushing in with the front right up along the coastline here. That should push rain in from to possibly as far east as maybe Dillingham, definitely Togiak, northward to Bethel, and then across St. Mary's on out to Nunivak Island on maybe as far north as Cape Romanzoff. It'll stay cloudy, showery, and breezy, and occasionally wet, with IFR covering much of the Bering Sea here with the main low center. Now north of the Aleutians here and southwest of St. George Island, 983 millibars. Look for some possible low clouds, drizzle, and fog central Arctic coast. Otherwise, you'll stay fair to clear along the north slope into the Brooks Range. And then for tomorrow, a day much like today here for the Panhandle, same sort of situation. Breezy northwest winds along the central and south coast, maybe up to 25 knots. Mostly sunny, warm in the Copper River Basin. Again, temperatures quite warm here over the Panhandle. Interior looking really good. Chance of thunderstorms with yet another weak system disturbance dropping southeastward here. Caught up in some pretty good westerly jet, actually. So this next front here, not quite reaching the coast. Maybe late in the day some drizzle or light rain could show up on the central coast, but nothing heavy. Remnants of that front here, very weak, but still keep it mostly cloudy, damp, and a little unsettled, especially Kodiak Island, the Alaska Peninsula, up the Aleutian Range, Kamishak Bay, and to a much lesser extent in over the Kuskokwim Valley and back to the northwest. Looks pretty showery for the Seward Peninsula, especially on the central and south coast of the Bering Strait. And that low weakening now, drifting slowly north, will keep a chance of rain in the Pribilof Islands, and lots of low clouds, drizzle, IFR out over the Bering Sea. And then the outlook for Tuesday. Another system, southwest flow really increasing now across the Bering Sea, and that's going to drive this next frontal system right into the southwest interior with rain, possibly into southern Cook Inlet in the afternoon. Definitely Kodiak Island, Kuskokwim Valley looks pretty wet, and that should help the fire danger here in the areas from the Yukon Delta to the Nulato Hills, definitely with rain increasing and moisture, a little cooler temperatures. Wet for the northern Bering Sea, St. Lawrence Island, a little bit of a break here, but a trough swing some more showers into the Pribilof Islands. Next system pushing rain into the western Aleutians. Otherwise, not a lot of change here for interior Alaska. Mostly sunny, warm temperatures, 70s to mid 80s once again. And Panhandle may see a little low clouds, fog may persist a little longer, and that's about it as far as any changes go. For the lows tonight, mid 50s to mid 60s, warmest down south for the Panhandle, and upper 50s near 60 central interior, mild also on the north slope there with lower to mid 40s Arctic coast. Highs for tomorrow back into the definitely in the 70s to lower, possibly mid 80s once again. Beaver had 84 this afternoon, 80s again over the southern Panhandle, otherwise 70s, high 60s along the coast, and lower to mid 60s here for the Bristol Bay area, Yukon Kuskokwim Delta, cooler out toward the coastline as it usually is, and right around 80 for the greater Fairbanks area, and upper 50s there for the Arctic coast, but back into the mid 70s for the north slope. And then again, those lows will be mild up that way, near 60 over the upper Yukon Valley, upper 50s back to the southwest here for the lows, upper 40s Aleutians and Bering Sea, 40s to lower 50s Copper River Basin, mid 50s south central Alaska, and well, or 50s for the Panhandle next day for the highs on Tuesday. Maybe losing the 80s here on the southern part of the Panhandle, but still back into lower to mid 70s, maybe a few more clouds persisting a little longer. So keep the coastal areas cooler, mid 60s, 80 to 85 over the eastern interior from the Copper River Basin right on up to Fort Yukon, and cooler back to the west.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
On to flying weather. Looks like VFR will be VFR tomorrow morning here north of the Alaska Range, out over the lower Kuskokwim and Yukon River Valley areas, northward all the way to the Arctic coast there, and looks like into the Arctic, southward, VFR across the Seward Peninsula. Then you pick up the marginal there, St. Lawrence Island, IFR on out to the southwest. IFR south side of the Alaska Peninsula, east side of Kodiak, and looks like possibly up the eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range, more likely in the southern areas there, and just iffy up here to the north. IFR into Prince William Sound, and still right off the southeast coast. And then for Monday afternoon, we still have that lower condition with the low clouds right along the coastline, VFR inland, VFR Copper River Basin, again all the way up into the Arctic, with marginal VFR up into the southwest, looks like possibly into the Kuskokwim Valley, back to the southwest mountains. Along the coast, Seward Peninsula now into the IFR after a VFR start, and no change out west. Again, no change out here over the Bering Sea, except this area of IFR creeping eastward Marginal VFR to the coastline, St. Lawrence Island. IFR now north side, Seward Peninsula, Shishmaref up along the coast to about Point Barrow, then marginal east of there. Marginal in Brooks Range. Same pattern here, south central Alaska, the Gulf, the Panhandle. So moving on to the Tuesday afternoon forecast. Thunderstorms possible along the eastern border there. Otherwise, no change. The low conditions right up along the coastline. VFR in the interior. IFR now central eastern Arctic coast. So, well, pretty good change for Tuesday afternoon from the morning here, where you see it was marginal VFR, kind of a reverse from the lower conditions now, the better conditions occurring on the western side. Otherwise, looks like the IFR breaking up here over the central Bering Sea a little bit, but still pretty good stronghold out there. Marginal along the Aleutian Zone, Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak Island on the south side. Up the east side looks like it'll be IFR. And now mostly the Aleutian Range seeing the IFR maybe into Kamishak Bay. And northern Cook Inlet, the Manuscus, the Sitna Valleys, VFR in the afternoon, as well as I believe I said the Copper River Basin. For passes tomorrow, Anatuvik and Adigan will both be VFR once again. And for Lake Clark and Merrill, same pattern, generally VFR, lowest conditions on both eastern entrances where it could be marginal VFR in those locations. Rainy though will be VFR. Same forecast for Windy, Isabel, good VFR again, as well as Montasta. And for Tanita, VFR. Portage, marginal VFR becoming VFR into the afternoon. Some improvement there. Chilkoot and White, yet another VFR day. And for freezing levels, warm air aloft, 12 to 14,000 feet here over the Panhandle, across the Gulf into the southwest, 10,000 feet up to the north there around the Brooks Range on out. And then a little bit cooler here, 8,000 feet with the upper level low trough over the east central Aleutian areas, and then warming back up again out to the west with that warm air aloft. Really not looking for any significant icing below about 9,000 feet, or 8 or 9,000 feet for that matter. Icing free all the way up to the Arctic coast. Of course, icing free over the Panhandle as well. Icing free everywhere. And for the winds aloft, here's the upper level ridge holding strong here off the southeast coast and ridging up into the interior. But we have the upper level trough here in the just north of the Aleutians. So between the two features, we've got a southeast jet at about 70 knots coming into the southwest interior, and then a westerly 70 knot jet there affecting the central Arctic coast with that upper level low. And at 9,000 feet, pretty good winds with the low here in the Bering Sea, 30 to 50 knots there across the Pribilofs, 50 knot winds possible tomorrow at 9,000 feet, 35 to 40 along the southwest coast, lighter under the higher pressure over the interior, 10 to 15 out of the west-southwest Arctic coast there with that jet, 35 knots west-southwesterlies, and diminishing to 20 here over the Aleutians, light northwest flow over the southeast coast, both at 9 and 3,000 feet. Light winds over the southeast interior, picking up from the west and southwest, 20 to 30 knots, strongest along the central Arctic coast, 30 to 40 knot winds there with that system in the Bering Sea. And for turbulence, moderate chop pretty likely here. Bristol Bay, lee side of the Alaska Peninsula, areas of the Aleutians, Pribilofs, and along the southwest coast areas. Otherwise pretty smooth everywhere else. And after the break, I'll be back with a look at the marine forecasts.
Leatherbacks are the largest turtles on Earth, growing up to 7 feet long and weighing more than 2,000 pounds. These sea turtles are among the most highly migratory animals on Earth, some traveling up to 10,000 miles a year between their nesting and feeding grounds. Prevalent in every ocean except the Arctic and Antarctic, the species overall is declining, more so in the Pacific. In the eastern Pacific, the Mexican population was once thought to be the largest in the world and has experienced an alarming decline.
This trajectory of decline that we've seen and actually collapse. We're talking about only 20 or 30 turtles nesting every year, where thousands used to just 40 years ago. That's the kind of dramatic decline.
The western Pacific population has been declining steadily, and it's particularly critical to act now before it collapses, while there are enough turtles in nests to respond to conservation measures. but threats to all leatherbacks in the Pacific need to be addressed.
The top threats to populations are uncontrolled coastal development, all the bad stuff on the nesting beaches, egg harvest, poaching of the females, predation on the eggs by dogs and pigs. Deforestation makes the sand too warm and dry and the eggs don't hatch. Another one is incidental capture in fishing gear. During their vast migrations, they get caught in fishing gear throughout the Pacific. And finally, marine debris, which the leatherbacks mistake for their favorite food, jellyfish, and they choke on those.
Protecting leatherbacks in U.S. waters alone is not enough to ensure the continued existence of the species. The highly migratory nature of Pacific leatherbacks requires cooperation and international collaboration. NOAA is focusing on partnerships with Mexico, Central America, Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, and the Solomon Islands in the Pacific.
Our action plan promotes a holistic recovery strategy that addresses all the sources of mortality. So that's basically ensuring that the remaining nesting sites are protected and the nests produce as many hatchlings as possible. And then secondly, in tandem with that, is reducing the fisheries-related mortalities. We're working with international partners to incentivize community participation on the nesting beach conservation and developing alternative livelihood programs that wean communities off leatherback resources and introduce alternative methods for food and income. Recovery is going to take a long time, on the order of 20 to 30 years at least, before we see some of these actions bear fruit. But here in the US, we can all help leatherbacks by making seafood choices, for instance, that support sustainable fishing practices. And beachgoers can certainly do their part by keeping our oceans clean of plastic debris, picking up marine litter, particularly plastic bags.
Together with our partners, we are strengthening protection and conservation efforts to ensure a future for leatherbacks, helping them to survive and once again thrive in the waters of the Pacific Ocean.
For over 40 years, NOAA scientists have been collecting data and piecing together the story of the gray whale. Each year, new discoveries are made, revealing the secrets of this ancient traveler. With the northeastern Pacific population recovered, leading scientists from the NOAA Southwest Fisheries Science Center continue their research efforts to help save the western population from extinction. The most effective way to identify individuals and count the population is to photograph them from the surface. Using the gray whale's distinctive markings and gray spots caused by parasites on their skin, scientists document these characteristics to identify individuals.
So we're able to track migratory pathways and corridors by the simple use of photo identification. There are other ways to do that as well, biopsy sampling and genetics.
And from the air.
Aerial photography is one way you can study animals based on their size and shape. So you can learn a lot about nutritive and reproductive condition of whales just by measuring their size and shape from vertical aerial photographs.
You can also put satellite transmitters on them and track them remotely. You put the transmitter on and let them go, and you watch them move across the Pacific or down to China or wherever it might be.
To further learn and discover where these great sojourners swim, the team of researchers traveled to Russia and set up camp on Sakhalin Island.
The main focus of our research while we were on Sakhalin was to collect photo identification. If it was a whale that we had not collected a genetic sample from previously, we would also attempt to collect a sample from the whales.
Whereas whales are endowed with natural insulation, their human observers must gear up to brave the cold in order to study these marine giants up close.
We're typically only able to work about 1/3 of the time that we're there, and that's mostly due to this fog that just invades the area and sits sometimes for weeks on end. So it can be very challenging to try and do field work in this site.
Recently, 2 whales from the western population surprised scientists by migrating across the Pacific to the waters of California and Mexico.
It's a really fun finding. It's added another piece to the puzzle that we didn't previously know about. And I would have to say that it's opened up more questions than we had before.
Research scientists from Japan, Russia, and the United States share images of animals they've spotted.
We take a photograph of an individual off of Sakhalin Island, and we get a phone call from Japanese scientists, and they say, hey, guess what? We've got a picture of a gray whale in Japan. We say, can you send it to us? We'd love to try and match it. They'll send us the picture, we'll compare it to our catalog, and we'll say, hey, we've got a match from Sakhalin to Japan.
Unlike many species of whales that still remain on the endangered species list, the eastern Pacific gray whale, once on the brink of extinction, now numbers about 20,000 individuals. Recovery efforts that started 40 years ago and the ongoing research and monitoring by NOAA scientists have contributed to the conservation of the gray whales. Together, with legal protection and public education, scientists are playing their part to ensure the survival of this magnificent migratory animal.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at the sea ice analysis for today. Really not much different from yesterday, and the trend or the forecast isn't much different from yesterday either. Still continue to see breaking up here in the main ice pack up to the north and also through here, but this multi-year ice will be a lot more persistent and not much change expected out here. Still maybe northward, 10, maybe 20 nautical miles over the next 5 or 6 days. So moving on to the coastal water forecast here for the Panhandle. Small craft advisories here for just about all the coastline, 25 to 30 knots with 8 to 9 foot seas here on the south coast. Northwest 15, inside waters, Lynn Canal south 15, west 20 on the extreme north coast. And that holds for Tuesday as well. Winds come down though a little bit here on the central and south coast, 20 knots now, and then 25 on the south coast there, say from Sitka on down, and 15 knots from the northwest or Clarence Strait, Stevens Passage, west 15, south 20 now for Lynn Canal. Prince William Sound, light westerly winds at 10 knots, seas 2 feet or less. West 10 to 15 for the North Gulf Coast, seas running 4 to 5 feet. Pretty good conditions there. Variable at 10 for Cook Inlet tomorrow, seas 2 feet or less, or yeah, around 2 feet. And then southeast 20 there for Kamishak Bay, south 15 for the Barren Islands. Outlook for Tuesday, southwest 10 for Cook Inlet and 1 foot seas. I thought I saw that in the forecast. And 2 feet south of the Forelands, southeast 15 for Kamishak Bay, southwest 20 here, Barren Islands, western North Gulf Coast. Turn easterly here in the eastern zone and southwest 10, Prince William Sound. For Kodiak Island, south 20 here on the east side, Shelikof Strait, southeast 15. And then from Sitkinak to Cape Sarachev, south 25 knots, seas 10 to 12 feet, even stronger on the Bering Sea side of the peninsula. Southerlies at 30 knots, and you'll be looking at higher gusts out of the bays with 7 foot seas. Southeast coming at about 20 there for Bristol Bay, seas at 4 feet. Outlook for Tuesday, southwest 20 to 25 here for the Alaska Peninsula, 25 from the south on up towards Sitkinak, 20 knot winds from the south-southwest for Kodiak, south 20 for Bristol Bay. And for the Fox Islands tomorrow, minimum gales in the forecast there with mainly north of Unalaska Island, south 35 knots, otherwise south to southwest at 30 knots with 12 to 14 foot seas. Small craft advisories also continue here for the central Aleutians, west-southwest 25 to 30, seas 9 to 12 feet, and winds diminish on out to the west. For Tuesday, small craft advisory, southwest 25 now, picking up a little bit there in the western zones. East side here, or I mean as you head east to the central Aleutians, south to southwest 25 knots, 7 to 8 foot seas, and it looks like pretty uniform southwest 25 knot wind pattern here across Umak and Unalaska Islands with seas running 8 to 9 feet. And for the southwest coast, small craft advisories tomorrow, southeast 25 knots, seas 8 to 9 feet, even stronger for the Pribilofs, southeast 30 with 14 foot seas. East 25, 9 foot seas there for St. Matthew Island, southwest 20 for St. Lawrence Island, Norton Sound, a little lighter at 15 with 2 foot seas. And that holds for Norton Sound on Tuesday, east 20 for St. Lawrence Island, southwest coast, south 25, a couple more days of small craft advisory winds coming up there, east 25 for St. Matthew Island, and southwest 20 for the Pribilofs with seas running at about 8 feet. Up along the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, light winds from the south-southeast at about 10, pick it up to about 15 here on the central coast. 20 knotters here on the west side, and then back down to 15 from the south-southeast, Cape Beaufort all the way down to the Bering Strait, Wales. And then on Tuesday, lighter winds now, kind of east to south or variable here, 10 knots, east on the west side. Again, really, you could call this whole thing variable at 10, east or west at 15 for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. And moving on to tonight again, dry with some clouds in the interior, but basically dry light winds, very mild tonight, upper Yukon Valley, also in the southern southeast coast, mild temperatures there, some staying in the 60s, diminishing showers and gradually diminishing clouds south central Alaska, North Gulf Coast, little clouds and fog pushing back in toward the southeast coast, maybe some drizzle, rain with this system trying to advance eastward, makes a fair distance inland, areas of light rain into the southwest interior, and rain chances continue Kodiak Island. Pretty breezy here around this low center over the central Aleutians. Tomorrow, front weakens, and on Tuesday, still hot in the eastern interior.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.